A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
Imagine you are hearing this, the sharp, rhythmic master caution chime of an F-35 Lightning II. Your heart rate is at 140 beats per minute. You are pulling 9 Gs in a sustained turn. Your vision is narrowing into a grey tunnel, and your G-suit is crushing your legs to keep blood in your brain. Now, contrast that with this sound. The gentle, two-tone ding of a passenger service call in a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Someone in seat 24B wants another ginger ale. The transition between those two worlds is one of the most fascinating and, frankly, most difficult professional recalibrations in the modern workforce.
Herman Poppleberry here, and that contrast is exactly what we are digging into today. It is the Top Gun fantasy meeting the reality of wide-body physics. We often think of pilot skill as a linear progression. You fly a small plane, then a fast plane, then a big plane. But moving from a fighter cockpit to a commercial flight deck is less like a promotion and more like a total psychological and technical transformation. Our housemate Daniel sent us this prompt about the transition from military cockpits to commercial flight decks, and it really got me thinking about the invisible constraints we live under every time we fly.
It is a great prompt, Daniel. Most passengers have no idea how narrow the slice of physics is that they actually experience during a flight. I like to call it the comfort corridor. It is this invisible boundary where engineering capability meets the fragile reality of a human being holding a hot cup of coffee. Today, we are going to break down why you can't fly a 300-ton jet like a fighter, even if the wings could technically take it. We are going to look at the G-suit paradox, the boredom myth of long-haul flying, and why the military to airline pipeline is changing so drastically.
And we have some really interesting data to look at. We are seeing a massive shift in pilot demographics. In the 1980s, something like 66% of commercial airline pilots in the United States came from a military background. Today, that number has dropped to around 33%. Part of that is the Air Force pilot shortage. They are short about 1,850 pilots as of late 24, and part of it is the increased service commitments. If you train to fly an F-35, the government wants you to stay for at least 10 years. That changes the kind of veteran entering the commercial space.
It really does. It is moving from an environment where you are the weapon system to one where you are the ultimate customer service manager, even if you never see the customers. Let's start with that comfort corridor Herman mentioned. When you are sitting in 32A, cruising at 35,000 feet, you feel like you are standing on solid ground, but you are actually hurtling through the air at 500 miles per hour. The only reason it feels like your living room is because the pilots are working incredibly hard to stay within a tiny envelope of physics.
Oh, it is incredibly narrow. If you look at the flight data from a standard commercial leg, most of the time the aircraft is operating between 1.0 and 1.1 Gs. That is it. A turn that feels steep to a nervous passenger is usually only about 25 degrees of bank. In a fighter, 25 degrees is basically just a gentle suggestion that you might want to head in a different direction eventually. But in a 300-ton airliner, 25 degrees is the standard limit for comfort. If a pilot banks to 30 degrees, the flight attendants might start looking at the cockpit sideways. If they go to 45 degrees, which is a 1.41 G load, things start falling off the galleys.
And that is the key word, isn't it? Comfort. In a military context, the airframe is a tool to achieve an objective. If you need to pull 9 Gs to evade a missile, you do it. The pilot has a G-suit, they have a 5-point harness, and they have been trained to perform the anti-G straining maneuver. But in a commercial jet, the passengers are the cargo, and they are fragile. They are often walking around, drinking hot liquids, or trying to fit a suitcase into an overhead bin. The moment you step outside that 1.3 G envelope, you aren't just risking the airframe, you are creating a mass casualty event inside the cabin.
And this brings us to the actual engineering limits, which is where the Top Gun fantasy really falls apart. Most people assume that if a pilot pulled a hard maneuver in a Boeing 777, the wings would just snap off like toothpicks. But the Federal Aviation Administration regulations, specifically Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 25.337, require these aircraft to be designed for a limit load of positive 2.5 Gs. And they usually have a safety factor of 1.5 on top of that, meaning the structure shouldn't actually fail until about 3.75 Gs.
So the plane can handle it, technically. If a former F-16 pilot decided to pull a 2G turn, the wings would stay on.
Technically, yes. The wings will flex like crazy. You have probably seen those stress test videos from Boeing or Airbus where they pull the wings up using giant hydraulic rigs. They look like a giant U-shape before they finally snap at 150% of the design load. But while the plane might survive a 2.5 G pull, the interior would be a disaster. The floor tracks that hold the seats in place, the galleys, the lavatories. None of that is designed to withstand the kind of aggressive maneuvering a fighter pilot considers routine. You would have carts flying through the air, overhead bins bursting open, and hundreds of injured people long before the wings ever gave out.
It is a fascinating paradox. The pilot has the power to do it, but the environment forbids it. And this is where the philosophy of aircraft control comes in. We have talked about this before, back in episode 507, but the difference between how an Airbus and a Boeing handle these limits is really central to this military to commercial transition. If you are a former military pilot moving to an Airbus, you are entering a world of hard limits.
Right. The Airbus fly-by-wire system operates under what they call normal law. It is basically a set of electronic handcuffs. If you try to bank the plane more than 67 degrees, or if you try to pitch the nose up past 30 degrees, the computer simply says no. It doesn't matter how hard you pull that side stick, the software will not allow the aircraft to exceed those parameters. It also has alpha floor protection, which prevents the plane from stalling by automatically increasing thrust. It is designed to prevent exactly the kind of hero maneuvers that might save a fighter but would destroy a passenger cabin.
And Boeing takes a slightly different approach, right? More of a soft limit philosophy?
Boeing's philosophy is that the pilot should always have the final word. Their fly-by-wire systems, like on the 777 or the 787, have envelope protection, but they are back-driven. If you pull hard enough on the yoke, you can override the protections. There is more tactile feedback. For a former military pilot, the Boeing might feel more natural because it feels like a traditional airplane where your physical input has a direct, override-capable link to the control surfaces. But in both cases, the goal is the same: stay in that tiny comfort corridor.
I want to go back to the demographic shift you mentioned, Herman. That 33% number for military pilots in the airlines. That is a huge drop from the 66% in the 80s. Why is that happening now? Is it just the pilot shortage?
It is a combination of things. First, the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps are struggling to retain pilots. The shortage of 1,850 pilots in the Air Force is a real crisis. To combat this, the military has increased service commitments. It used to be that you could do your initial commitment and jump to the airlines in your late 20s. Now, with 10-year commitments after winging, pilots are entering the commercial world in their mid-30s or later. At the same time, the civilian flight training industry has become much more efficient. You have these massive pilot mills that can take a student from 0 hours to a commercial rating in 18 months.
So, the pipeline is being replaced by a factory. But does that change the quality of the pilot?
It changes the flavor of the experience. A military pilot comes in with thousands of hours of high-performance, high-stress decision-making. They have been trained to operate in environments where people are actively trying to kill them. A civilian-trained pilot has thousands of hours of operating within the system. Both are highly skilled, but the military pilot has to unlearn a lot of things to fit into the commercial world. One of the biggest things is the single-seat mindset.
Right, the lone wolf problem. If you were in an F-16 or an F-35, you are the pilot, the navigator, the weapons officer, and the communicator all in one. You make a decision, and it happens instantly. You don't have to check with anyone. But in a wide-body jet, you have a co-pilot. Maybe a relief crew on a long-haul flight and a massive support structure on the ground. You have to use Crew Resource Management, or CRM.
CRM is the absolute bedrock of commercial aviation safety. It was developed in the late 70s after a series of high-profile crashes where the captain made a mistake and the co-pilot was too intimidated to speak up. For a former military officer, especially one who might have been a squadron commander, moving into a world where the first officer is encouraged to challenge your decisions can be a jarring social dynamic. You can't just be the lone wolf. You have to verbalize everything. You have to say, I am moving the flaps to position 5 and wait for the confirmation. It feels glacial compared to a dogfight.
I have heard military pilots describe the transition as moving from a world of brevity to a world of verbosity. In the military, radio communication is all about tactical brevity. You use specific code words to convey complex ideas in half a second. Fox 3 means you've launched an active radar-guided missile. Bingo fuel means you have just enough fuel to get home. It is silent efficiency.
And then you get to the commercial world, and you are dealing with civilian air traffic control in a crowded corridor like the Northeast United States. You have to do full readbacks of every instruction. United 123, climb and maintain flight level 350, turn left heading 270. You have to repeat that exactly. It is a lot of talking. You are no longer a silent warrior, you are a professional communicator. Some pilots find that incredibly tedious, while others find it a relief that they don't have to worry about someone jamming their signal or shooting at them.
Let's talk about the boredom factor. This is a big debate in aviation circles. People call commercial pilots bus drivers in the sky. The idea is that you take off, you turn on the autopilot, and you sit there for 12 hours watching the sun move across the sky while the computer does all the work. Do former fighter pilots get bored flying a 12-hour leg from New York to Tel Aviv?
It is a common misconception. On the surface, yes, it looks like bus driving. But when you dig into it, the cognitive load is just different. It is not about G-forces and missiles, it is about ETOPS. That stands for Extended Range Twin Engine Operational Performance Standards. If you are flying a twin-engine plane like a 787 across the Atlantic, you are governed by ETOPS rules. You have to know exactly where your diversion airports are at every single second of the flight.
Right, because if one engine fails over the middle of the ocean, you need to know if you can make it to Gander, Newfoundland, or the Azores on the remaining engine.
And it is not just, can we make it? It is, what is the weather at Gander right now? Is the runway contaminated with snow? Do they have the emergency services to handle a 300-ton jet with a blown engine? You are constantly running what-if scenarios in your head. If we lose an engine now, where do we go? If we have a medical emergency, what is the closest hospital? If we lose cabin pressure, what is our escape route through the mountains? It is a game of chess played at 500 miles per hour over a 14-hour period.
It is the difference between a sprint and a marathon. A fighter mission might be incredibly intense for 90 minutes, but a commercial flight requires you to maintain a high level of situational awareness for over half a day. You have to manage fuel temperatures so the Jet A1 doesn't freeze in the tanks. You have to monitor volcanic ash clouds 300 miles ahead. I think the bus driver label is really unfair. A bus driver doesn't have to worry about the physics of a fluid medium or the logistics of keeping 300 people alive at 35,000 feet in a vacuum.
You're right, and I think that is why the military background is still so highly valued by airlines like Delta, United, and American. Even if they have to unlearn some habits, that foundational training in threat awareness is invaluable. This actually brings us back to our discussion about El Al in episode 1138. In Israel, the military-to-airline pipeline is almost the entire system. Most El Al pilots are former Israeli Air Force, and that creates a very specific culture.
It is a unique model. When you have a pilot who has flown combat missions, their definition of an emergency is very different from someone who has only ever flown civilian. If a sensor fails or there is a minor mechanical issue, a former military pilot is much less likely to panic. They have seen much worse. That emotional regulation is a huge asset in a commercial cockpit. But again, they have to balance that with the passenger experience. You can't just dive the plane to clear a mountain if it is going to send 200 people to the hospital.
That is the G-suit paradox we mentioned. In a fighter, you rely on your equipment, your G-suit, your oxygen mask, your ejection seat to survive the environment. In a commercial jet, you are the one creating the environment. If you fail to manage the pressurization or the pitch, the passengers have no safety net. They are just sitting there in their street clothes, maybe with their seatbelts off. It is a massive responsibility that requires a different kind of discipline. It is the discipline of restraint.
I also want to touch on the technical side of the transition programs. Because of the pilot shortage, we are seeing airlines like Piedmont or SkyWest creating these dedicated military transition programs. They are essentially teaching these pilots how to fly slow. They spend weeks in simulators just practicing how to make a turn that doesn't spill a drink. They have to recalibrate their inner ear to accept that a 1.2 G turn is a normal maneuver, not a sign that they are about to stall.
It is almost like learning a new language. You have the vocabulary of flight, but the grammar is completely different. And I think we should talk about the future of this pipeline. As drones and autonomous systems take over more of the military's tactical roles, will we see fewer pilots with that combat instinct? Does the commercial world lose something if the military pipeline dries up completely?
That is a tough question. On one hand, modern airliners are becoming so automated that the pilot's role is shifting more towards systems management anyway. You could argue that a tech-savvy pilot who grew up with high-fidelity simulators and complex software might be better suited for a modern cockpit than a hotshot fighter pilot who wants to feel the plane. But on the other hand, when things go wrong, when the computers fail and you are left with just a stick and a rudder, there is no substitute for that military-honed instinct for survival and precision.
I agree. I think the best pilots are the ones who can bridge that gap. The ones who can be the systems manager 99% of the time, following the checklists and the CRM protocols, but can flip the switch and become the tactical pilot the moment the situation demands it. Think about Chesley Sullenberger. He was an Air Force veteran. When both engines failed on that Airbus A320, he didn't just follow a checklist. He used his foundational understanding of energy management and glider physics to put that plane in the Hudson. That is the military mindset saving lives in a commercial context.
It really is about professional recalibration. You aren't losing your skills, you are just putting them in a different box and only opening it when necessary. The transition isn't about forgetting how to fly a fighter, it is about learning how to be a guardian. It is a shift from being the tip of the spear to being the shield for the people sitting behind you. It is a fascinating evolution of a career.
And for those of us sitting in 32A, it is comforting to know that even if our pilot used to fly supersonic jets, they are currently very focused on making sure our ginger ale stays in the cup. They are managing the comfort corridor, so we don't have to think about the fact that we are in a pressurized tube at 35,000 feet.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground today, from the structural limits of a 787 to the psychological shift of crew resource management. If you want to dive deeper into the history of how these planes are controlled, definitely check out episode 507 on the evolution of aircraft controls. We go deep into the Airbus versus Boeing debate there. And if the security side of things interests you, our episode on LL's model, number 1138, is a perfect companion piece to this discussion.
Yeah, those are great episodes to follow up with. This has been a fun one, Korn. It is always interesting to look at the invisible rules that keep our world running smoothly. The fact that a plane can handle 2.5 Gs, but we only ever feel 1.1 is a testament to how much work goes into making flight feel boring. And in aviation, boring is good.
Boring is very good. Thanks to Daniel for the prompt that started this whole dive into the cockpit. It was a good one. If you have a weird question or a prompt you want us to dig into, head over to our website.
You can find all our past episodes, the RSS feed, and a contact form at myweirdprompts.com. And if you are on Telegram, just search for My Weird Prompts to get notified every time a new episode drops. We also really appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps other people find the show and keeps us going.
It really does. Until next time, I am Korn.
And I am Herman Poppleberry. This has been My Weird Prompts. Keep asking the weird questions, everyone.
Fly safe.
Indeed. Take care.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, my weird prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts, that's the flows from sloth, from man, from long-eared host. My weird prompts, until next time, stay curious, keep